So welcome to our Introduction to Kabbalah, Part 2. If you have not viewed Part 1, then please check out Part 1 that is on our YouTube. That will cover all the general information that is necessary to begin with this stage. Okay. Part 2, we're going to go into much deeper aspects, including more Hebraic concepts, traditional kosher concepts, including the evolution of creation. Aspects that are often not dealt with in most Hermetic Kabbalistic schools. Namely, the Tzimtzum, the entire process of emanation, the Shevirah, or the Shattering, and then we will touch briefly upon Tikkun. And this will definitely extend into another seminar, 2 or 3 probably. So let's just get right into it. So first of all, everyone should have started their homework, I really hope. Your homework from Lesson 1 was to begin learning the Hebrew letters. Again, there are 22 Hebrew letters, and if you study one a day, then you will know them within 3 weeks. That is not a huge challenge, and over those 3 weeks, you will have the opportunity to develop a new habit as well. So start learning those letters as soon as you can. And if you have not received the email with the cheat sheets and the flashcards and those things, then please send me an email to grandmaster@martinism.net, and we will send you an email with the cheat sheets and all that stuff. To review briefly about Lesson 1, we went through learning the letters. We went through the basic structure of the Tree of Life, composed of the 10 Sephiroth. These are concepts that almost anyone who's picked up a Kabbalah book or has looked into the Hermetic Initiatory traditions is familiar with. The 10 spheres, which are 10 emanations of deity, 10 aspects of deity that manifest in God, in nature, and in man. And through these 10 Sephiroth, we can understand, together with the 22 paths, we can basically classify and categorize all realms of existence. We covered the 22 letters, their corresponding 22 paths that connect the Sephiroth, or the vessels, the spheres, as well as went in depth into their attributions on the Rose of Creation. Namely, well, we'll get to that moment. The Rose of Creation is on the right, the Tree of Life on the left with the 22 paths. So the 32 paths of wisdom, just like the 32 grades of some orders, are composed of the 3 mother letters, which are Aleph, Mem, and Shin, the elements of air, water, and fire. The 7 double letters, which are categorized as the planets, the 7 classical planets. The 12 simple letters, or the 12 signs of the zodiac, which all together, with the 10 Sephiroth, form the 32 paths of wisdom, known as the Kabbalistic Tree of Life. Now today we're going to get deeper into the emanation of the universe. I believe we touched on this very briefly at the end of last session. And again, anyone who's picked up just about any book that deals with Kabbalah, whether a K Kabbalah, a C Kabbalah, or a Q Kabbalah, kosher, so-called Christian, or so-called Hermetic Kabbalah, should be generally familiar with these 10 Sephiroth and this emanation from the first sphere at the top down to the bottom sphere at 10. 1 to 10. And that diagram on the right is what is called the path of the flaming sword, and that is the emanation or evolution of the spheres from the top to the bottom, from 1 to 10. You are probably also familiar with the concept of the Tree of Life unfolding through 4 worlds. I believe we touched briefly upon the 4 elements as representations of those 4 worlds. You see on the right the divine name of the Hebrews, Yud He Vav He, or Yahweh, or Jehovah, or Yahweh, which is expressed and manifest through the 4 worlds of the Tree of Life, which are 4 of those trees stacked one on top of each other, or more properly, one under the other, going down from the top, Yud, fire, to He, water, the blue, to air, the yellow, Vav, the black, the earth, Asiya. There in the center, you see the Tree of Life unfolding through 4 worlds. This is more what we're going to deal with today, is this circular diagram. We're pretty much going to scrap the version you're used to, because that doesn't manifest until much, much later in the actual full creation story of the Kabbalists. So today we're going to go through the more kosher story, which is the Lurianic Drama of Creation, Fall, and Redemption. Lurianic, referring to the Rabbi Isaac Luria, the Ha'ari, the lion, who lived in the 1500s and is pretty much the penultimate Kabbalist that almost all modern Kabbalah, whether K, C, or Q, is founded upon. However, most of his teachings are not actually taught very well outside of Hebrew Kabbalah, outside of kosher Kabbalah. If you're in the Golden Dawn, or if you're studying it through the SRIA, or the Scottish Rite, or other organizations, you're probably not going to delve into these concepts as much as you should. So we're going to start exploring them a little more today. Namely through 3 acts. Act 1, creation. Namely the contraction of deity in order to be able to emanate. Act 2, the fall, which is the breaking of the vessels. Act 3, the redemption, or tikkun, the restoration of the worlds. So let's jump right into it. One thing we touched upon last time was Genesis 1 to 3. The first book of Genesis, Bereshit. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth was formless and void, and darkness was upon the face of the deep. And the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters, and God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. We explained this through the use of the 3 mother letters, the fire above, the waters below, the air in between. We're now going to go deeper into this, and we're going to talk about the time before the beginning, before Bereshit. We're going to talk about deity in his or its infinite capacities, and how this world came about. Beginning with Act 1, creation, contraction, and emanation. So namely, we are trying to describe how the infinite became the finite. How deity, who was everything in all things, manifested itself and manifested creation in a finite world, that world which we now know today. How did the infinite become finite? The tree of life that you're familiar with emanated from the bosom of divinity, from the nothingness and the void of the eternal. This is a concept we're usually familiar with. And this is the concept we're going to delve deeper into, is what is this nothingness? What is this void? And how did it emanate from there? From nothing to something. The eternal being, as it must be by definition, God, the eternal, being in all, out of its desire to create, emanated itself for its greatest glory. We're going to begin with the symbol of a 0 or an O. All. Being, go back one. Being in all. The eternal first had to create a space in which it was not. If God is everything and is everywhere, if it is the infinite, and just bear with me, we're going to go through some of these concepts multiple times because they are rather thick and complex. The all being in everything, being everywhere, it being the only thing that was, for all time and all space, which did not even exist yet, it is all that it was. How could it create if it already was everything? The moment it would try to create or try to make anything, it would just suck right back into itself because it is everything. Nothing else could exist except its eternity. So we symbolize this. One way to symbolize this is really just a blank slate, a tabula rasa. But we're going to start off showing a circle, because a circle can be said to have no beginning or no end. Now you can try to separate that circle and pull it out into a line. Then you could say, here's the beginning, here's the end. But a circle proper has no beginning, has no end. This is why in schools such as esoteric schools, such as Freemasonry, the compasses symbolize deity because they draw a circle. Circles which have no beginning or no end. They represent that transcendent aspect of reality and of deity. So deity, in order to create, had to make a space in which he or it was not. I'm going to use the term he often because it is just a common nomenclature. but understand that deity in this aspect, the highest aspects of deity, possesses both. It is all in all. Every time we attribute any word to it, any attribute, any phrase, all we can really do with that phrase is limit it. That is why it has all these terms like the all-encompassing, the unlimited, the uncreated, the first and the last. Because once we start calling it he or she or anything else, we begin to limit it. Another great term to use is it, or as the French under Martinist de Pasquale, the Le Coëns, Jean-Baptiste Willermoz, the CBCS, and Saint-Martin, they called it la chose, which is French for the thing. Literally it, the thing. So it had to create a space it was not. The Kabbalists call this process of creating that empty space the Tzimtzum, which means contraction, constriction, or condensation. This could be symbolized perhaps as an inhalation. So if deity is everywhere, it now inhales a space in the center of its being in which it creates a void. This first void can be conceptualized as the chaos or the void, the still unmoving waters of creation that we read about in Genesis 1, 1 and 2. But properly being said, this is still before Genesis. These are all overarching, overlapping myths and symbols. What is happening in one stage can be represented in another stage. So there's an inhalation in which in the very center of its being, it inhales, and it in a way removes itself from a space. Now understand that this is in essence impossible, because God cannot not be everywhere. But this is a conceptualization we use to try to understand the transcendent and the incomprehensible. Within this negative space, then, in the very center of this space, which is the center of deity, of its being, the Eternal then exhaled this mighty breath, and the letters of creation flowed forth from the Spirit of God, from the Ruach Elohim, the Spirit of God, the breath of God, literally. From this infinite point, extended the line of God's being into the chaos or void of the waters of creation. Now, again, these are convenient terms we're using. The waters of creation, right? Points, lines. These are conceptualizations. We can say that first there's that inhalation, exhales right in the center, and then something manifests from it. This would be right here symbolized as the A, the first, the Alpha, or more properly, the Aleph. The first letter of the Hebrew alphabet, the Hebrew Aleph-Bet, the beginning of light that is birthed in darkness, that is birthed in the void, that is birthed in nothingness which is also everythingness, which is eternity. And one of the beautiful things about the Aleph is that this diagram, this image, starts from the center, back up, starts from the center, and it emanates out into all directions and begins to spin, to cleave its way through creation. Okay, so here's our first really easy way, very beginner way of looking at this Tzimtzum process. Get a little deeper into it. The Kabbalists have this conception called the Ain, or often it is spelled, when you look at the older Hermetic writings, such as Rosenroth or Mathers, the Golden Dawn, Crowley, etc., they're going to spell it A-I-N. That's why I've used that. When you look at some of the more recent kosher documents, they're going to use an E-I-N or an E-Y-N. So just gave you that there to not confuse you. The Kabbalists have this conception called the Ain Soph, and the Eyn Soph Aur. So the tree life as we know it represents our manifest universe, behind which is the unmanifest infinity and eternity of deity, and truly the unknowable. That's why they call it the three negative veils of existence, because it is literally unknowable. We are doing our best to conceptualize this. These are often represented above the tree of life as three semicircles above Keter. 3 veils separating the outpouring or emanation from it, from la chose, from deity, from Barukata. Over here on the right, you see a circular tree of life with, in Hebrew, written Ain Soph Aur. Well, kind of. It says Ain Soph. And Eyn Soph Aur isn't actually written in this one. Ain and Eyn Soph. First, the first negative veil of existence is said to be Ain, or Ayin. Go both ways, actually. It's a double entendre. Meaning nothing, or nothingness, or no thing. Everything's all about puns in Kabbalah. Puns and connections. And again, this is all just a very brief intro because these are extremely thick concepts that would take much more than these small lectures can go on, can express. So first there's the aim, the nothing, the nothingness, the no thing. We can't even comprehend it, so we just call it nothing, no thing. So you have the aim, the nothing, the nothingness, the no thing. Then you have the Eyn Soph, which becomes the limitless, or the without end, is one way to describe what Eyn Soph is. It is limitless, it is without end. We start having from nothing something that is everywhere, that is all. And eventually what bursts forth, what is the tree of life, what is Adam Kadmon, what is reality, is the Ain Soph Aur, the limitless light, the boundless light that would blind our eyes. It is the light that even Keter is a veil for. The light that expresses why Moses had to veil his head, his face, after coming down the mount and seeing Israel, because he would have blinded them. So let's go deeper into these. Ain Soph, Eyn Soph Aur. Here's another image of that from the Kabbalah Unveiled, or the Kabbalah Denudata of Rosenroth. And he starts off in the outer circle. The outer circle here would represent, well, let me see. Maybe you could say the outer circle would be that inhalation. And then first there's the negative existence. A, I, N. Then the limitless. Eyn Soph. From that, Eyn Soph Aur. And in the very center of all of these emanates Keter, the crown, the very first. This diagram is taken from McGregor Mather's translation of Kabbalah Denudata, which is highly recommended if you are familiar with general Kabbalistic concepts, because this will get into 3 books of the Zohar, namely the Book of Concealed Mystery, the Greater Holy Assembly, and the Lesser Holy Assembly. And these have concepts of creation that we're going to just barely touch upon today. So there's a misspelling there that says Ayer. It's supposed to say Ain, nothing and something. Ain and Yesh. We're essentially talking about how nothing becomes something, how nothing emanates something. So here's another conceptual diagram showing a circle and a line through it. That which is above represents transcendence. That which is below the line represents immanence or presence. Above is that pure essence of deity, which we can truly only call as Ayin, or Aleph, Ayin, no thing, the concealed, the oneness, or also Eyn Soph, the limitless. Below the line is when we can actually start conceptualizing things. This is the immanence. These are deity's attributes, which manifest as the 10 Sephiroth, the 22 letters, and this is what we call Yesh, something, that which is revealed. So whenever we're working with Kabbalah, we're always having this inherent duality of Ain and Yesh, of nothing and something, transcendence and immanence, the concealed and the manifest. So let's take those basic concepts we looked at and go a little deeper into it. We're going to take them again. The Ain, the N, the Eyn Soph, the infinite. You see yourself before yourself a blank slate, a tabula rasa. The infinite, or the Eyn Soph, exists everywhere and forever in all eternity, without any limits of time or space. as a single, undifferentiated unity. This infinite reality is beyond the comprehension of the human mind and is a concept to strive for in prolonged meditation. And this is where we can start getting practical and get really weird with Kabbalistic meditations, is try to, go through those basic practices that we give you in either the pre-associate operation of Ordre Martinistes Souverains, or look at the point meditation as given in the Sodalitas Rosicrucis. And once you come to peace, once you come to a true meditative state, strive to feel what eternity is. Strive to feel what the infinite is. And these are the kind of things that will stretch and bend our mind, our imagination, and our souls. So we conceptualize this infinite. One way to conceptualize it is as an infinite sea of light, pure energy with no shape or boundary, no time, no space that exists. Then we have the Tzimtzum, the contraction. Here's our second look at it. We could view that as this inhalation. Okay, as this negative space, this void. We've now created inhalation. When the will to create arises with the infinite, it withdraws its infinite light from its midpoint, creating an open space or empty void, the Tzimtzum. Tzimtzum literally means contraction, restriction, concentration, or condensation. If you remove the Vav, the second to last letter, it also expresses reduction or precision in language. It can also represent, in modern terms, the shutter of a camera. And the shutter of a camera basically blocks the light for a moment so that an image can be made. It's very much the same kind of concept. And this is part of the beauty of Kabbalah, is that the deeper we get into the Tzimtzum, the deeper we get into these stories, the closer we get to modern-day quantum physics. So the all is everywhere. This shutter happens in which a nothingness is created, a contraction. This contraction by the infinite makes it possible to have creation of finite universes that have boundaries and limits. This could not have occurred without this self-initiated withdrawal of the infinite into itself. And that is that vessel, that first vessel, which is a kli, essentially. It's a space that can hold the light. This next step is that a single ray of light, which symbolized here, a single ray of light projects in a straight line into the void to the center of the infinite. So it has projects into the center, and this begins to take the form of the 10 Sephiroth in both a linear matter coming straight down as well as circular. So now we can actually start to understand that first diagram we showed. We have the inhalation, and of course these are conceptualized. There is no time or space. This all happened instantaneously. There's an inhalation, the line goes down, and as it goes down, spheres, husks begin to form around it as it becomes condensed, more protected, more dense, so that it can actually have something to hold and something can contain the light. When we look at this diagram, the outer circle says, the first circle to create is Keter, then Hakma inwards, then Bina, Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and in the center, Malkut. But you can also argue, and there's other ways to look at it, where Keter is in the center, it's the first one to go down, and it is both in the center and on the outside. Okay, it is 1 = 10. So we have circles and line. Circles and a line, as Paxson said there. First, you have the circle, the initial vessel, the initial void, the initial kli. Then emanates a line, a kav. This is a ray of divine illumination shining into the kalal. This primordial vacuum is also called kalal. And you could envision this kav, this line, as a plum, just like the Masonic image of a plum that drops itself down into the center, and then husks form around it, spheres form around it. This can give us something to reflect when we look at William Blake's image of the Ancient of Days. We have this infinity, and we have this infinite light that measures with a compass and creates a space and begins to emanate out. What's fascinating about this image is, which stage are we in? I'm not going to answer that. Like, it's for you to think about. But it does look like there's a hand there over that being. So as Paxson said, that first sphere, that first tree we looked at, is actually an image of Adam Kadmon. The image before you is from J. Augustus Knapp, from his illustrations of Manly P. Hall's Secret Teachings of All Ages. He calls it the Grand Man of the Zohar. Now, this shows an anthropomorphized Adam that we're familiar with, and you see 4 phases. A dark, a little lighter, and then earth we're familiar with. Stands on both earth and water. He is both material and spiritual. Wouldn't necessarily be proper yet. You could represent those as the 4 worlds that will come from him. Okay? The Sephiroth that come down into this diagram we saw. Oops. Back. So the Sephiroth are, that we saw circular, together in a circle, in one vessel, form Adam Kadmon, who is the sole conduit and filter through which energy flows from the infinite into the finite worlds that are destined to be created in the midst of the void. Adam Kadmon, the Emanator, is therefore the link between the infinite and the finite worlds. So just as that kav, that line, that ray of divine illumination shines into the kalal, the primordial vacuum, the nothingness, the inhalation, it forms the pristine realm of Adam Kadmon, the primordial man, who is the first of the actual 5 Kabbalistic worlds. Adam Kadmon is the realm of Keter, superconsciousness or divine will, perhaps. Because he's said to be above the 4 worlds. This is not the man we know about. This is not the man that we read about in Genesis. This is the archetype of what Adam became. This is a purely spiritual man, not born of woman, not born of time and space and matter, not limited by any of the attributes we know, but a pure spiritual being, clothed in a heavenly body of glory. This may be familiar to some of you who are involved in various traditions. This Adam Kadmon is all light. And yeah, I would like to get into the Rishima and all that, but I think we're just going to... He is all light. He's only limited by the power of the impression left in the empty vacuum. But that's probably too advanced for today. So to continue on this, this next diagram is from Kabbalah Denudata of Rosenroth, one of the penultimate Kabbalistic texts of I guess like 1700, 1600. It is translated by Mathers in his Kabbalah Unveiled. Pretty much every single Golden Dawn Kabbalistic diagram comes from one tiny section of this book. That's how amazing it is. So here we have an image, a proper image of Adam Kadmon, as a sphere of circles. And you see at the very top, it says Adam Kadama. So it is naming Adam, that is the outer circle. When we follow those words to the left, we see Keter. And that is the first Keter being created within Adam. We go down. The next series of circles says Olam Ha Tohu. Tohu. Chaos. Void. And further and further, these things condense. So we have Olam, Nikuba. I didn't get to where I was able to write this whole part yet, but you have all the spheres made down to there. So, from Adam Kadmon, this is not really an image of Adam Kadmon, but there's no good images out there. Eventually, we'll draw one ourselves. But this is also from Kabbalah Unveiled. The light that flows in from the infinite, from the Ain Soph into the Eyn Soph Aur, which is properly Adam Kadmon, that throws into his one vessel, which is a sphere that condenses into 10. This one vessel, the light begins to emit from Adam. It begins to emanate from him out of his ears. My camera on for the video. It comes out of his ears, out of his nose, out of his mouth. And then finally, when he opens them, he emanates. Well, first, the lights from Adam's mouth with all the others merge together to form the world of bound lights, the Akudam. Okay, we're not going to go too far into that. Maybe we'll have an entire lesson on that one time. The next stage is that when he opens his eyes, the 10 Sephiroth are emanated, but they are separated. They're isolated. They're independent points of light. Creates what's called the world of points, Olam Nekudim. This is not the tree of life we're used to. And that's what Paxton was trying to say earlier, is that this tree of life you see in my shirt, well, you don't see, but they'll see it in the video. The tree of life you're familiar with is not a concept yet. The triune, the triangles, that is not there yet. It is a sphere and a line. So these 10 vessels come out as separated points, perhaps as a straight line, one way to conceive them. These 10 vessels themselves are made from the thicker aspects of the light, and eventually 10 Sephiroth are made to contain the light being emanated from Adam Kadmon. From these initial emanations are formed innumerable universes, which culminate in the 4 worlds we're probably already familiar with in some way, which are Emanation or Absolute, Creation or Bria, Formation or Yetzirah, and Action or Asiya. And we're going to touch on those much deeper in a future video, but for right now, here are the 4 worlds in a sphere. You see the Ain Soph. As it condenses into the center, you see Absolute, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, or fire, water, air, and earth. Now, there is the first stage. Okay, there is the Tzimtzum, the contraction. The infinite is everywhere. It inhales, makes a space where it's not. It exhales the Kav, the line of light, and begins to form Adam Kadmon. And then Adam Kadmon emanates from himself, out of his ears, nose, mouth, eyes, his own creations. Right? And now let's move on to the next stage. The Lurianic Drama. This is stage 2, the breaking of the vessels. And we're conceptualizing this right now as a straight line. And we used colors that you're familiar with to make it easier. So going down, that'd be Keter, Chokmah, Bina, Chesed, Gevurah. Because the 10 Sephiroth in this stage, when viewed either as linear, as presented here, or as isolated points, they are independent with little or no interaction between them. They aren't in a triangle. They have no relation. They just move one direction. They just receive. Their vessels become unable to contain the infinite light that keeps ever pouring out from the Eyn Soph through Adam Kadmon into them. They have nowhere for the light to go. You take an alchemical vessel and you just keep filling it, like you're filling a balloon with more and more water. And eventually, this results in what we call the shattering of the vessels, or the Shevirah. So Shevirah literally means shattering. You see it spelled in Hebrew at the top. Shevirah. This comes from the root shavir, shin bayet resh, which means to break, smash, or shatter, fracture, failure, or mishap. Those are all things we probably think of when we think of the fall, right? But it also can mean grain or food. So that gives something to contemplate as far as how and why this happened. Again, like we said, all of creation is a kli. Adam is a kli. Root. Another root that is linked to this is shabi, which means captivity, imprisonment, exile, or as a noun, exiles or captives. And that's a very Gnostic term that we're used to, is the idea of the exile. But it can also represent or be a root for shabib, which is a spark, a ray of light, or a small flame. So that gives us three different ways to look at things and see the complexity and the puns of what's happening here. When this shattering occurs, there are multiple schools about all of this. Whether we're, what did I just do? There are multiple schools about all of this, whether we're looking at pure Lurianic Kabbalah or reading the Tanya, or we're talking Hasidism, but we're just giving you a general presentation right now. So let's say we get this line. The first three of the vessels are said to be merely damaged, and these would eventually become the supernal triad. They aren't broken. They're able to retreat. But the broken shells, which become klipot, of the lower vessels, they fall down to form the lower worlds, where they take the form of material substance, and they become the source of all evil experienced in this world. They become the source of matter as well. Most Hermetic Kabbalists focus upon the klipot as being evil, or demons, or undesirables, etc., etc. But as we're trying to show is that in the before beginning, Adam Kadmon, the Tzimtzum, the first thing, was a kli. It was a vessel. So most of the divine light, when this shattering occurred, it inhaled itself back up. So we can imagine that deity was blowing a line down into the sphere of light, and when they broke it, retracted the light back up into its eternity. Most of this light returned, but and what Paxton just said there about how the backsides of the Sephirah fall. For those of you who have worked the Golden Dawn tradition, this is symbolized in the 4-7 by the Garden of Eden diagram, and is symbolized by the turning away of the father and the mother. Though properly that represents a different stage, and properly the parts of them did not exist yet. The parts of them are actually created as a part of correction, as a part of tikkun. So now we're going to get into the next stage. So the shattering has occurred. Just to one last thing on the Shevirah. These vessels that fell, the 7 that fell down, they fell to the lowest of worlds, our world essentially now, and they took the form of material substance. They had movement, they had light, they had life, because you can imagine the light and the vessel. Take a glass vessel, like an alchemical vessel, an alembic, or a wine bottle, and put oil in it. You can pour that oil out into the sink, but if you drop and break, so you can retract the light, right? Retract the oil, pour it out. But when you drop and break that wine glass or that vessel, there will still be oil clinging to the vessel. That is symbolic of the Rishimu. That is symbolic of the leftover, the light that was still clinging to the vessel after the retraction. And that light clinging to the vessel is what gave movement and life. So let's talk now about the restoration. So things have fallen, right? It came from Adam Kadmon. The vessels cannot contain the light. They shatter. Part 3 is redemption, the restoration of the worlds. The Tikkun. We begin to see things form in a different way. The cosmic process of correction, or Tikkun, brings the worlds to their originally intended harmony and balance. This first begins in the highest of realms, starting the world of Emanation, or Absolute, where the 10 Sephiroth begin to be reconfigured as personifications, faces, or the Hebrew word is partsifum. There's a whole bunch of Kabbalistic jokes off that, like, we're all parts of them, eh? But parts of them. So these parts of them, you see them here in this red diagram. The red sphere on the right of Chokmah says Abba, represents Yud. That's father. The one to the left, the blue, Binah, says Ema, hey, that is mother. Notice it's an Ema with a Yud in it. There's also Ema and Ama without the father's Yud. Sterile. Then the yellow is a Vav that represents the sun, Zorin Pin, or the prince. And then the bottom is the black, the final Hey, Malka, or Kala, the bride. Together, these represent the father, the mother, the prince, and the princess. They can also be envisioned as the tarot, the court cards of the tarot, the king, queen, prince, and prince of all 4 suits, which that'll be another call one day, is how the tarot relates to the Kabbalah. To make it short, the 4 suits, wands is fire, cups is hay, or water, swords is vav, or air, and pentacles, or discs, or coins, or whatever, represents hay, or earth. Within each one of those 4 suits, you have king, queen, prince, princess, yud, hay, vav, hay. And those are the partsifum of Keter, Chokmah, Tiferet, and Malkut. We now have with Arik and Pin representing Keter, representing the long face, the patient face of deity that looks over all things and sees the change of emanation creation and weathers it with time and patience. Whereas we begin to eventually, somewhere down the line, become manifestations of Zorin Pin, of Tiferet, which, contrary to popular belief, is actually the impatient face. It is the child that has no brains, the child that has no wisdom or patience. But there's a lot more to it than just saying Tiferet is Christ consciousness. There's so much more to it. Now, another way to picture that, I should have pulled this up earlier. There's your Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, right? Keter, or Chokmah, Binah, Tiferet, Netzach. If I didn't express this earlier, Adam Kadmon is formed of the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet. He is, properly said, the Torah. He is the law. He is the word. And what happens here is that the Torah is rearranged triangle. So, in this face with triangles, you now have interaction. In a straight line, you can't talk to each other. There's no communication. There's no back and forth. In a triangle, you now have balance. You have giving and receiving. Now they can achieve the dynamic and harmonious equilibrium that was missing in the world of points or Nikudim. And the vessels are thus able to contain and transmit the light flowing from the emanator without breaking. Another way to look at this, there's the supernals, Keter, Chokmah, Binah, in a triad. Here's the tree of life, represented as a series of triads reflecting itself. And we'll get much deeper into that and the traditional tree of life you're familiar with another time. And then there you see the triad and balance of the elements, as we showed before. So Tikkun, restoration. The restoration from here on. So now we have the tree we're familiar with. I should have put one in here. There it is. There's the tree. Here's where we have the tree we're familiar with. We have the pillars of wisdom on the right, strength on the left, beauty in the center. That's only when we're looking at it this way. When we consider it on the human body, it's wisdom on the left, strength on the right, beauty or harmony in the center. Now we have those three pillars. Now we have the foundation of creation. We have a stable foundation upon which creation can actually be built. So when we're looking at the tree of life that you're familiar with, understand you're already looking at a rectified tree, a restored tree. Does not mean that it is the final restoration, because we notice that there is a gap there, which we often fill with da'at. And that is something we'll spend an entire session on. So, the harmony and the balance of the triad, the tikkun or restoration. We're going to make this very brief, because we'll have to go into it deeper in another session. So, tikkun. There, Paxson said, this restoration of the world has already occurred. We are in beauty. We are in nature. And here's where we could start to bridge the gap from this kosher Kabbalah into the theosophy of Yakabuma, of Saint Martin, the philosophy that nature is not to be abhorred, that nature is Sophia, that nature is beauty, that it is, in Kabbalistic terms, it is your bride, Kala, your Malka. It is what you want to unite with. That nature is, the book of nature is where we read the writing of God. It's where we have communication with deity. Now, one version of the myth, which starts to bridge into the popular Hermetic myths that are perpetuated in most esoteric orders, will begin here. That whole previous part is hardly ever touched upon. The Golden Dawn touches upon it briefly when they talk about the Dukes of Edom. And notice that we didn't get into that this time. That might be another session. But that's about all they go into it. So the restoration has occurred through the four worlds. And as Paxson said, it has still to be completed within Adam, within us, the children of Adam. It begins below with the creation of the first human being, who is formed like the primordial Adam Kadmon in the image of God. But this became, through the fall of Eden, through eating of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, etz hada'at, knowledge of good and evil, it brought duality into itself. It brought good and evil into itself. It came to knowledge of good and evil. It became good and evil. Because when we speak of knowing something, especially in a biblical sense, obviously to know someone biblically is sexual, but it also is, it's deeper than that. It is a complete union with it. It's like a samadhi with it. So if you take a kosher approach to eating of etz hada'at, then eating of the tree of knowledge, then we became good and evil. We invited duality into us. We became both spiritual and temporal. So this lower Adam was originally created in order to complete the process of repairing the broken universe below. And here's where we can finally start to get into the immature concepts that most Kabbalists, Hermetic Kabbalists, entertain. As above, so below, all the catchphrases. But instead, man brings about mankind's exile from its ideal state symbolized by Eden and comes into the world of mixture, where black and white cannot be told apart, where the good and evil fights in his heart. That world which the sparks of light remain hidden among the shells of the broken vessels. Man's job now is to gather what is scattered. Just like man is split and divided across the face of the universe, us Adams, children of Adam, are to seek out those hidden sparks of light, liberating them both outside of us, but first within ourselves. In kosher Judaism, like Paxson said, this is accomplished through performance of the mitzvot, which are the positive commandments. These are, and I'm not versed in this at all because I'm not a practicing Jew. not a Jew at all. But essentially through prayer, study, acts of kindness, actions that will help unify the lower world within and without, and the higher world within and without. And Jews think that this will help to bring about the Messianic era, which all will be perfect, etc., etc. As Hermetic magicians, we have at our disposal all the tools of Hermetic, Kabbalistic ceremonial magic. We have the ability to tap into the forces we looked at in video 1. We have the ability to tap into the 10 Sephiroth, our 4 elements, our 7 planets, our 12 zodiacal signs, come to knowledge of them, both within and without, both the external objective force of what is Taurus, as well as the internal force of what is Taurus. Unite all of its dualities so that it becomes one again. And in most initiatory systems, we'll have a whole thing on this one day. You go through each of these forces, unify them, in order to gather your scattered self back into the perfect Adam. Yep. And when we're reading HaTorah, the different levels of lifting the Malbush, you're reading the body of God. You're reading the body of nature. And orders help us to go through these things by having us systematically go through these 32 paths, these 32 forces within and without us, and unite them. Now, I think we're coming to near the end of what we can actually fit in for today. I think that we're going to show you a brief introduction of what some of the future things we're going to discuss are. Someone asked, where does a flaming sword and lightning flash to Malkut come in? We will go far into depth into those usual concepts next video. We're going to go into the 4 worlds of creation, how these are emanated, what they mean, and what to do with them. How we can use these 4 worlds here to ascend through levels of reality, to do what it could be called climbing the spheres or rising in the planes, to have out-of-body experience, etc., etc. We will investigate these primary Kabbalistic diagrams from Kabbalah Denudata. And if you know what you're looking at, those are all the diagrams of the Golden Dawn. Every single one of them. And then we'll discuss, after all of that, we'll go into the specific details, this will probably be video 4, of the initiatory structure of the Tree of Life, and what the Golden Rosenkreuz, Hermetic or the Golden Dawn, Argentum Astrum, and other systems go through as you ascend from Malkut to Keter. Perhaps we'll do some path workings. We'll see if there's interest in that. Before we exit, though, I do want to bring up the flexibility of Kabbalistic systems. And that what we've been looking at tonight was my best attempt to take very thick concepts of Lurianic Kabbalah into a 1-hour presentation. And that don't be discouraged when you pick up a text and it contradicts some of what you heard here. Or you pick up another text and it contradicts some of that. It depends on what stage you're looking at and what area you're looking at. For example, in kosher Judaism, because apparently there is a big split in how they understand tikkun. So tikkun, this image right here could be perhaps an image of tikkun in a different way. This is Saint Martin, the inspired founder of Martinism. He didn't actually found anything. This is him showing the first steps of creation from Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. The Aleph is the upper sphere, which would represent Ain Soph, the limitless, the incomprehensible, Keter, etc., etc. Bayet, and that sphere, which in French says Immensité des esprits de l'expo central du cercle universel. The immensity of the spirits of the axis of fire, central fire axis, or the universal circle. That could, in one sense, not perfectly, but in one sense, represent the first Kli. It could represent that inhalation, the Tzimtzum. And then the exhalation could be represented by the Gimel and the Dalet, the Holy Spirit, the Ruach Elohim, coming down to the vessel and manifesting the threefold word of the eternal, which is manifest as the eternal flame. And just to, again, show some diversity and flexibility of the Kabbalistic universe, this is the universal table from the Elu Coën. Looks, at first glance, very similar to what we've seen, especially when we start looking at the Tree of Life in spheres and lines. It does it in a slightly different way. It uses some different terms, but we're essentially talking about the same thing. And one of the great things about the Martinist tradition is that at the very bottom of this diagram, you see that downward pointing triangle, terrestrial soul, and terrestrial form, terrestrial soul. That both represents the material world, symbolized by a downward pointing triangle, the body of man, as well as the soul of man, composed of sulfur, salt, and mercury, and containing latent within itself the quaternary, the triple word Yud-Heh-Vav-Heh, which is to be discovered through the alchemical process of vitriol, visita interiora, terra rectificando, invenis occultum lapidem, or visit the interior of the earth. By rectifying, you will discover the hidden stone. That stone being the stone of the philosophers, that substance, that reality, which unites all mysteries, unites and dissolves all mysteries of heaven and earth, and confers the one truth. Nope. And this Kabbalistic story is the story that has been told again and again and again. And the things we talked about here, the Tzimtzum explains how God is in everything, how God is everywhere, because it has always been everywhere, and everything was created within the body of God. We have this conception of Tzimtzum, of separation, but it's nothing exists outside of him, and he or it exists in all things. And that's where Kabbalah is just like modern physics. You know, we look at this world, we're like, hey, there's a chair. You know, I don't see God, I don't see Hashem in that chair. I see a chair. But if you zoomed in on that chair, I mean, what else is that chair composed of? It's composed of wood. And what is wood composed of? Zoom in, it's composed of atoms. Zoom in, it's composed of quarks. Zoom in, it's composed of strings and, you know, the way that we talk about parallel universes and everything. That is, yep. Just one thing, just to go and show another example of how these things are all universal. This is from Robert Fludd's 1617-ish. It's like 1617, 1624, something like that. One of his alchemical sequences. And it's an account of the macrocosm and the microcosm. It shows the origin and structure of the cosmos through a series of pictures, the creation and evolution of the cosmos. Now, Robert Fludd was a Hermeticist, an alchemist, one of the founders of modern Hermetic philosophy. Most of the Hermeticism of his age was founded upon the biblical account of Genesis. And we'll just see. I'm not going to give too much commentary. Let's just go through it real quick. Here's blank slate, infinite light, and a contraction, a breath, ruach, the divine fire being lit and cooled by the waters so that it does not burn itself up, creation of a central sun, and creation of layers, condensation happening, a separation the above and the below, formation of a mass in the center. Is this a return or is this a projection of the Holy Spirit? That's up for you to figure out. And are these plates in order? Eternal flaming sun around a vastness of nothingness. And a cooled, condensed earth in the center. Malkut is the point of all of it. The kingdom. Yeah, the kingdom. It is the center of the tree, as Paxson said. It is this image right there. Malkut is the center, and that's what he's trying to say, that it's the center of all creation. The earth, this existence, this plane, this reality, is the reason for creation. And it is here to have relation. Closing quote from Albert Pike. We mentioned this last time. Masonry, when properly expounded, is at once the interpretation of the great book of nature. The Kabbalah is the key of the occult sciences, and the Gnostics, according to Pike, were born of the Kabbalists. That is Morals and Dogma, 28th degree. Recommended reading. The book Paxson was mentioning is right there at the bottom right, because it's one of the more complex ones. So I have this reading from left, top down. The Tree of Life, Chaim Vital's Introduction to the Kabbalah of Isaac Luria, translated by Menzi and Pede. It's awesome. And that's what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to give the context behind the context behind all these diagrams. All the stuff that happened to get to the tree that we're so familiar with. That everyone like today almost discounts because they think they understand it. We will continue this. Next week, we're going to take off of the Kabbalah because we have something else to do out in the middle of nowhere. A lot of cool people. But tomorrow night, we will have an intro to astrology at 6 p.m. And that will be basically a breakdown of the planets, zodiac, etc., because it all feeds in. So I hope to see y'all then, and then we'll pick it up with Kabbalah lessons 3, then 4, and then we'll go from there. Thank y'all mucho.